don't know about her. It's hard to not know about her. But anyway, so Dr. Christine Fair is a professor of distinguished associate professor in the Peace and Security Studies program within Georgetown University's Edmund A. Walsh School of Foreign Service, USA. She previously served as a senior political scientist at the RAND Corporation, political officer with the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan in Kabul.
Silence, please.
Sorry about that. In Kabul, and senior research associate at USIP's Center for Conflict Analysis and Prevention. She has served as a senior fellow at the West Point's Combating Terrorism Center, a senior resident fellow at the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis in New Delhi, and will take up her Reagan Faisal Democracy Fellowship in the spring 2017. Her research focuses on political and military affairs in South Asia, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Her most recent book is Fighting to the End, the Pakistan Army's Way of War, as well as she just finished another book in their own words, Understanding Lashkar-e-Taiba. We are really deeply honored that she accepted our invitation and traveled all the way from Washington, D.C. to be shared in this event. So, thank you.
Mic is just
Yeah.
Can I use that one? Okay. All right, is this on? All right. Well, thank you guys for inviting me here, and it's really fun to be here with Rubina and my good colleague, collaborator, and otherwise co-conspirator, Steph. So I'm a data person, so I do use slides to talk about data. And I'm also, my specialization is not human rights per se. I really do look at how the Pakistani military instrumentalizes Islam abroad, but also at home. And that's actually the focus of this book here in their own words. I just want to thank the artist, Saira Wasim. She's been very generous in letting me use her artwork for the last several books that I've done. She herself is an Ahmadi. So you can see that given the kind of artwork that she does, she also cannot go to Pakistan. And also I'm donating my personal proceeds from this book to the victims of Indian terror, because Lashkar-e-Taiba largely kills Indians as well as Afghans. The notable thing about this organization is they don't kill within Pakistan, as I'm going to explain in a few minutes. So one of the things that I have always found fascinating about Pakistan, from my earliest awareness of Pakistan's shenanigans, is that it has an army that keeps starting wars, yet doesn't win any of them, right? And despite this fact, Pakistanis love their army. I mean, it's almost American, right? You know, if you come to the United States, we even reserve supermarket parking spaces for veterans. I mean, it's like we worship veterans. It's really quite mysterious to me, given that, you know, the ways in which we have deployed our armed forces have not really been to service national interests in any significant way. So I'm always baffled. Why does Pakistan do what it does? And yet, even though it has started and lost every war, including losing half of its population and a significant piece of its territory in 1971, Pakistan remains committed to changing these borders, right? The tools that it uses is primarily Islamist militants and the nuclear umbrella, which affords it increasing impunity and immunity. And the consequence of using these tools has been an enormous blowback, right? There would be no Pakistan Taliban if there had not been an Afghan Taliban and a Jaish-e-Mohammed and a Sip-e-Sabeh of Pakistan, and the entire alphabet soup of Deobandi organizations. And so most scholars expect states to change their strategy when the strategy persistently fails to fructify, and when that strategy imperils the objectives of the state itself. Yet Pakistan doesn't do that. Pakistan just keeps on going, right? When I was a kid, we had these toys, they were called Weebles. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down, and that's sort of what Pakistan is. And in fact, over the years, Pakistan has redoubled on its revisionism. Not only does it want to change borders with India, it also sees itself as the one country that can stand in the middle of India's way as India rises. So this is not the kind of behavior that we would expect from what we would call a security-seeking state. A security-seeking state would not behave in this way. So in my book, Fighting to the End, I argue that it's not a security-seeking state. And this is, of course, the conventional wisdom that animated one of the earlier slides that you saw with the recent post-9/11 aid to Pakistan. Americans have generally believed if there was some way of making Pakistan feel secure in its own territory, it would stop killing Indians, it would leave the poor Afghans alone, because there's only one larger set of victims, actually, than the Pakistanis themselves, is actually the Afghans, right? But if there was some way of making Pakistan feel secure, it would stop mucking around in Kashmir and elsewhere in India, and it would stop mucking around in Afghanistan. And once it were at peace with its neighbors, it could be at peace with itself. And so the approach to this has been, let's just keep giving them shit, right? Whether it's an F-16, whether it's financial aid, and by the way, bilateral aid is not the most important thing that the Americans do for the Pakistanis, is continuing to support their demands for IMF funds, right? Even though the United States does not have a majority of votes on the IMF, if the US withdrew its support for the IMF, Pakistan would literally be screwed, because there's not enough coalition of the mendacious that would make up for those votes that would be taken away from the United States. The other thing the US likes to do, and I have to say, I didn't see this coming from the pussy grabber, also known as our president, that we like to do this stuff called grand bargains, right? So we saw this under Obama. Barnett Rubin and Ahmed Rashid wrote this piece in 2008 that if we could fix Kashmir, then we would also be able to fix Afghanistan. And these guys were important, at least Barnett Rubin was, because he was actually working for the special representative of Afghanistan and Pakistan. So this idea of a grand bargain keeps coming around. And obviously, the Gruppenführer, also known as President Trump, he also recently offered to intervene, the idea being actually Imran Khan's suggestion that peace in Afghanistan lies through Kashmir. The problem when you treat an ideological state like a security-seeking state, and you're essentially rewarding all of those behaviors that you find so problematic in the first place, right? So if you're Pakistan looking at the United States, and I'm always amazed when people, I had a meeting with a certain high-level senior U.S. official just a few weeks ago, they completely believe Pakistan is going to crack down on terrorist groups because they believe that Fatah is just choking them off. I actually laughed at this individual, despite her obvious rank, because I said to her, Dudette, I have one rodeo. I have been doing this rodeo since 1991. You just fell into this rodeo a few years ago. And so maybe you haven't seen this Groundhog Day play out where Pakistan pretends to clamp down, we pretend that we're satisfied, and then Pakistan gets whatever it wants, right? Because that's essentially how Pakistan bargains. So in my book, I say, look, it's an ideological state. And what's interesting about Pakistan, and you all know it better than anyone else, is that there's really only one institution that matters. I'm always amazed at the interviews with the Falana prime minister, when the prime minister isn't even the mayor of Islamabad. Right? He doesn't certainly, with the exception of, Benazir Bhutto, who's no longer with us, he doesn't set the relationship with India. He doesn't decide trade policy with his neighbors. He doesn't do anything except do like a kutputli, what the army tells him to do, right? Don't really care what he thinks, because his opinion, frankly, doesn't matter. All he can do is coke up and, march like a good soldier. Am I wrong about that too? I mean, there's a reason why his nose is so large, because it takes a lot to get the stuff in there. So, say, you are wrong, but you are not incorrect. So what makes Pakistan so interesting is that for almost everything that we care about, and even the things that you are talking about, these policies are set by the army, right? It's not set by the people that are allegedly elected or more appropriately selected by GHQ. So how does it do this? So, and in the interest, I don't want this to be one of those panels that goes over and we can't take Q&A. I want to be short and to the point. So it really has the same suite of tools that it uses, whether it's harassing India or trying to, beat into submission Afghanistan. And oh, by the way, I think we should just take a moment to recognize that despite enormous threats to their lives, Afghans went to vote. And the United States government wanted to cancel those elections as an appeasement to the Taliban. So I just, hands off to the Afghan people who, despite everything, voting matters. And damn it, I hate Zalilzad. That's what I call Khalilzad. I call him Zalilzad because he does Zalil. But when we're talking about the tools that Pakistan uses abroad, we know them, right? It uses the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the Lashkar-e-Wahidun, the Jaish-e-Murderer under the umbrella of its, under the security of its nuclear umbrella. And it also uses these nuclear weapons and this archipelago of petting zoos of terrorists to blackmail the world, right? Because if it didn't have these things, India would have sorted it out decades ago, right? And so how Pakistan literally negotiates is, we're just too dangerous to fail. And so as the IMF payouts keep coming, as US aid, it's been cut off, this is the one sensible thing that President Trump did. But I say that, if you give a monkey a typewriter with INT, a monkey will write it. President Trump will probably come up with a 3-letter version. Nonetheless, he got one thing right and taken the aid away from Pakistan. I'm going to give the man that, although I believe it's completely random. He's too clueless to understand how dangerous Pakistan is. But in general, Pakistan blackmails the world, right? And that's why I'm also darn certain it's not going to get a blacklisting at FATF. Because if it gets a blacklisting at FATF, it's not going to get an IMF payout. Right? And this is the thing that actually makes grown-up policymakers terrified. Trump, as I said, he just doesn't have enough acumen to understand how terrifying this prospect is. And so if we really wanted to get out of Pakistan's loop of blackmail, we would have to take seriously its nuclear weapons program and treat it with even more seriousness than we do the Iranians. But the Americans are oddly convinced that the Iranians are more dangerous than Pakistan, even though on a good day, the Iranians aspire to be Pakistan, right? But domestically, and this is something that people don't typically pay attention to because everyone is so focused upon what these militant groups do outside of Pakistan. But what I've been really looking at is how groups, in particular, the domestic facades of Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jamaat al-Dawa, and Falah and Saniyat Foundation, are actually used domestically to spread the deep state's ideology. And so many people will conflate these different groups. I spend a lot of time looking at their different ideologies because they spend a lot of time investing in their ideologies. So LET is very different from all the Deobandi groups that we typically hear about. They are ideologically opposed to them. They're also ideologically opposed to the Islamic State. And the political party that they fielded, the Milli Muslim League, if you look at the documents that you can find about it, its party manifesto aligns with the GHQ wish list. It says it supports CPEC, it supports pacification of Balochistan, which is of course also just a way of killing every Baloch to make it safe for Chinese exploitation. And so it, in every way, shape, or form, the MML's manifesto was supportive of GHQ. And I've argued many times that this is why the state allows critical service failures in places like Sindh, as well as in Balochistan. And actually, there's a very similar parallel. Today we heard a lot about how, in terms